The first round of the 2021 NHL Draft goes later on tonight. So today we're going to be doing a mock draft for the top 15 selections, and I'm going to give you my opinions on how these players will be drafted, and we're going to include as well some talk around what picks might end up being traded at the draft, if not slightly before, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're going to conduct our final 2021 NHL mock draft. Of course, we have the actual draft taking place later on tonight. We're going to only take a look at the first 15 picks just for the sake of keeping this video not too long. Of course, there will be 31 selections. Actually, there will be 30 in the first round, given that Arizona's pick is forfeited at pick number 11. But that would be a really long video, and I don't want to go too long here. So we're going to go the top 15 selections, and we'll kind of go from there. But obviously, we're going to also talk about some picks that are likely to be traded on the way. I am going to have every team make a selection within those first 15 spots. But we're going to talk as we go here about the picks and which ones I feel could be in play as potential big moves could be happening here as the draft either gets ready to start or even once it's already up and going. So we're going to go through now. We'll start at number 1 and work our way down to 15. Picking first overall, we have the Buffalo Sabres. And this is definitely a pick they're going to retain and select top defenseman Owen Power from the University of Michigan. Now, I know some Sabres fans might be anxious to get him into the lineup, but the big steady defenseman will be at least 1 year away from doing so. He is going to play at least one more season at Michigan before turning pro. Hasn't really been made clear what his intentions are beyond that, but it's going to be at least a year away before the first overall pick makes the jump to the NHL. Picking second, we have the Seattle Kraken with their very first ever draft selection. They will take Matty Beniers from the United States National Team Development Program. Of course, Beniers is going to be playing college hockey here as well. Another guy that the Kraken can be patient with here. They can let him develop. He does project to be a top 6 center. Maybe not a 1C. That's going to be determined here as he continues to develop. But we've seen with the expansion draft just how patient Ron Francis is likely going to be. They're a little bit weak down the middle. They could use some future prospects in that regard as well. So to me, it only makes sense to take the top center here in the draft. Picking third overall, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and they will likely select William Eklund, who's a top European-born skater in this draft. Now, this is a pick that would not shock me if it's traded, but I do think the only way it is would be if the Ducks do manage to complete a Jack Eichel trade. They've been rumored to be one of the teams in the mix. I'm not entirely convinced they're going to pull it off just because of their rumored reluctance to include guys like Zegras or Drysdale in a package. If they change their mind and they want to include one of those 2 top prospects with this pick and a couple of other roster players, especially younger guys like a Comtois, Steele, Terry Jones, like a combination of a couple of those guys too, then they could probably pull this off. But otherwise, if the Ducks are picking, I think Eklund is the best choice, assuming the other 2 players go 1-2 as we have them here. Picking fourth overall, we have the New Jersey Devils. Now, this was probably the worst kept secret in the draft, and they'll likely select from the United States national team, Luke Hughes, of course, the brother of one of their top young players and former first overall pick, Jack Hughes. Now, I really don't see a scenario where Luke Hughes goes higher than this. I guess you never know, but I don't personally see it happening. So as long as he's on the board and we know that the Devils could use another top young defenseman, it only makes sense between the family connection along with his abilities to project to be a solid top 4 D-man in the NHL, that it only makes sense that they make the selection. I think Jack Hughes would probably be pretty grumpy if they overlook his brother and make another selection here, assuming he's available. Picking fifth overall, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, the Jackets are likely going to be going in one of 2 directions, but I have them taking the second highest rated European skater, top defenseman from Europe, Simon Edvinsson. Now, he's a real tall, lanky defenseman with a long wingspan here. Does draw some comparisons to a Victor Hedman, but I don't see him being completely that type of player. But, that's obviously because they're European and the size is a large part of that. Now, this is also a pick that would not be shocking if it were moved. But again, the only way Columbus would move this is if they go in on Jack Eichel, and I don't see that happening. There was some talk about them earlier in this process of being involved, but I don't see that being the case. I see the Jackets not only keeping this pick, but also maybe even adding another one if they make a Seth Jones trade. So they could end up with 2 picks here high in this first round. And the only other player I think they would really consider taking would be McTavish. They're either going to take one of the top D or a top center because that's really what they need for this franchise. Picking 6 overall, we have the Detroit Red Wings. I have the Red Wings taking one of the top centers, Mason McTavish from the OHL's Peterborough Petes. McTavish is a powerful type center, can play a power forward type of role. I kind of have to wonder with the recent acquisition of Alex Nedeljkovic if the Red Wings might steer clear of a goaltender here. They've been rumored all along to be, largely considering taking Jesper Wallstedt of Sweden, and that could still be a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out. You got to remember, Yzerman did draft Vasilevsky after acquiring Ben Bishop in Tampa. Obviously, goalies do take a while to develop and become, full-time NHL ready to be a starter. And I can see a scenario unfolding where even if they ride with Nedeljkovic for 3, 4, 5 years, it could be that time frame before Wallsted's a real bona fide starter. So wouldn't rule it out, but I have them taking a top center, which they also really need in McTavish. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks picking 7th overall. And the San Jose Sharks are selecting in my mock draft Dylan Guenther from the Western Hockey League. Obviously, he would be a top scoring winger, one of the most pure goal scorers, I think you can say, in this draft class, and it's going to go early in this first round. The Sharks really do need a variety of everything. And to be honest, whatever team does take a goalie here first is going to throw this whole thing off. I don't see this pick being traded, just like Detroit's before them. Those are teams that really need these high picks. They need these prospects to continue this rebuild. I see Dylan Guenther, maybe being a year away from being NHL ready, especially where last season in junior was really almost, cut short for many guys, if not almost non-existent. So another year of development, and he could be playing hopefully a top 6 role in San Jose in the not-too-distant future. Selecting 8th overall, we have the Los Angeles Kings, and I have them selecting on top right-hand D, Brandt Clarke, of course, from the Barrie Colts of the OHL. Now, this is also a pick I could see traded. The Kings could go a multiple of ways here. I think they're really high on Clarke. They could use a top right-hand D for the future. Obviously they have Drew Doughty right now, but I think Clarke can be a similar type player, especially as Doughty gets a little bit older. He'd be a great mentor for Clarke, and it could be a great, asset to kind of take over from him as being the top D down the road. I think the Kings could also go off the board here and take one of the goalies as well, as Wallstedt or Casa, because they don't really have a deep amount of depth in that position in their pipeline. They have a really awesome prospect pool. They don't have much in the way of goaltending. And I can also see a scenario where they trade the pick, because they are rumored to be interested in players like a Sam Reinhart, for example. They are in on Eichel, or at least, rumored to be. I'm not sure if they're in as much as some of the other teams, but I could see a scenario where they do make a trade and include this pick as well. So we'll see what happens. Picking 9th overall, we have the Vancouver Canucks, and I have the Canucks selecting Kent Johnson, another top center here. Of course, Johnson also from the University of Michigan. Now the Canucks, also a team that could trade this pick. It's not going to be a complete shocker if they do. They've had a lot of high first-round picks in the top 5 or 10 slots here in the last number of years. They do have a pretty decent young core already. They are heavily rumored to be interested in bringing home, hometown boy Sam Reinhart from Buffalo. And this pick would likely have to be included if they're going to make a deal like that happen. So that's possible, but if they don't trade the pick, Johnson to me is an excellent fit. A really good-looking center iceman with a decent amount of offensive upside who could probably be a year or two away. He's likely going to play college hockey for at least 1, maybe 2 more years, and then we'll see where things go. But I think he'd be a good fit with that core in Vancouver if they don't trade the pick for another player who can help them right away. Picking 10th overall, we have the Ottawa Senators, and I have them throwing a little chaos on the board here and taking goalie Sebastian Casa of the Edmonton Oil Kings. He's actually rumored to possibly be even better than Wallstedt. Only time will tell. Both goalies project to be real solid guys down the road. The Senators obviously lost a young goalie in Joey Daccord in the expansion draft, and even though they're already relatively deep in the goaltending department, they have some other guys like Gustafsson and Sogard, Mandalese, etc. in the pipeline. I still think, based on what else is available here and what their needs are, they're not going to get a lot of anything else that's going to help them here in the immediate future because they have some pretty deep prospect pool already. So I think Casa makes a lot of sense. And you know what? Even though they have other goalie prospects, if the Sens really believe that he's better than all of them, why not take him, go off the board here? I don't think there's a likely scenario where we see Ottawa trade this pick either. It's very likely they're going to make a selection. Next up is supposed to be the Arizona Coyotes, but remember, they had to forfeit that pick because of the scandal where they were accused of testing underage draft-eligible players, so they will not be making a selection. At number 12, we have the Chicago Blackhawks, and I have them selecting another goalie, Jesper Wallstedt from Sweden. The Hawks could certainly use a goaltender of the future, there's no doubt. It's one area in their prospect pool and their depth charts that certainly is lacking. I do see a scenario as well where the Hawks could trade this pick. We know they've been hot after Seth Jones of Columbus. We also know that Columbus would love to have at least one more pick in the higher end part of this draft, as they need more prospects as well. So certainly wouldn't be shocking if they pull this off. Otherwise, if they do make a selection, I think a goaltender is a real possibility. I could see them going for a guy like Lucius maybe, but a goalie makes a lot of sense too. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames. I have the Flames making a selection from the U.S. center Chad Lucius. Now, Lucius could be a big help to this team. Likely going to be a year or two away from making the NHL again. Like a lot of these players, there is a large crop of these guys committed to playing college hockey, and some of them just need more time to develop. So, a combination of those two reasons will delay a lot of these picks, making it directly to the NHL. But in my opinion, the Flames really need a variety of everything here. And given the circumstances of where they're picking, I think they're just going to go with best player available. And in my opinion, based on what's on the board, Lucius fits that bill. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers selecting 14th overall, and I have them selecting center iceman Cole Sillinger. Now, Cole Sillinger is another guy that could go, anywhere. There's a lot of these players that could go anywhere from like 10 to 15 or even down 16, 17 range. But of course, Sillinger is a second-generation NHL player. His dad, Mike Sillinger, was well known for being the trade deadline acquisition on an annual basis. He bounced around to several NHL teams before calling it a career. But Sillinger's another good center prospect, and I think the Flyers at this point are bound to just take a player here that they feel most comfortable with as the best player available on the board. Picking at number 15, we have the Dallas Stars. I have the Dallas Stars selecting left winger Brennan Othmann from the Flint Firebirds of the Ontario Hockey League. Othmann is another interesting offensive player. I think could be a good help to the Stars. All the players are likely going to be available. When they make this selection, he apparently is one that's been of high interest to the Dallas organization, so it does make a lot of sense. They could also maybe look to a guy like a Coronado, for example, or maybe even another defenseman. But to me, I don't think they're going to go defense. I think they're going to go forward in this scenario, and Othmann is one of the more offensively gifted players available in this spot. So those are my top 15 selections for the 2021 NHL Draft. Of course, as always, I want to know what your thoughts are on my selection. Of course, we'll find out for sure later on this evening where these players end up going, what teams end up selecting them, and we can discuss that further as well. So there will be a recap video going up on the channel once the first round of the draft is complete as well. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors and all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.